The elevator doors were closing when Marcus heard a sharp cry that made his blood run cold, followed by the unmistakable thud of someone hitting the ground. He had exactly 17 minutes to get to the most important job interview of his life, the one that could finally pull him and his daughter out of the financial quicksand they'd been drowning in for the past 2 years. His finger hovered over the lobby button, his resume clutched in his other hand, and for one terrible second, he almost pretended he hadn't heard anything at all. But then the cry came again, weaker this time, desperate, and Marcus knew he couldn't live with himself if he walked away. So he did something that would change everything. He stepped out of that elevator and ran toward the sound, not knowing that the woman collapsed on the cold marble floor was about to transform his entire world in ways he couldn't possibly imagine. Before we continue with Marcus's incredible story, I want to ask you something. Have you ever made a choice that felt completely wrong in the moment but turned out to be exactly right? If this story touches your heart, please take a second to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel, because we share real stories about real people who remind us that kindness still matters in this world. Now, let's find out what happened when Marcus made the decision that would test everything he believed about sacrifice, fate, and the power of doing the right thing even when it costs you everything. Marcus Bennett had known struggle his whole life, but nothing had prepared him for single fatherhood. 2 years ago, his wife Sarah had walked out on him and their 5-year-old daughter Emma without explanation, leaving behind only a note that said she couldn't do this anymore. Just like that, Marcus became a single father working 2 jobs, barely sleeping, constantly juggling daycare schedules and bills that seemed to multiply like weeds. Emma was his whole world, his reason for breathing, and every sacrifice he made was for her future. But lately, the walls had been closing in. The rent had gone up again, Emma needed new shoes and school supplies, and the ancient car that got them both around town was making sounds that promised an expensive repair bill he couldn't afford. That's why the interview at Donovan Enterprises meant everything. It was for a senior project manager position with a salary that would finally let him breathe, maybe even save for Emma's college fund. He'd applied on a whim, never expecting to hear back from one of the largest development firms in the city. But they'd called, and somehow, miraculously, they'd been impressed with his experience managing construction projects for a small company that had gone under last year. The interview was scheduled for 9:30 in the morning, and Marcus had planned everything down to the minute. He'd dropped Emma at school early, rehearsed his answers until they felt natural, and arrived at the gleaming downtown high-rise with 15 minutes to spare. He'd felt almost hopeful stepping into that building, his one good suit pressed, his shoes shined, his confidence building with each step toward the elevator bank. The lobby was massive and intimidating, all polished marble and steel, the kind of place where important people made important decisions. Marcus had practiced his handshake, his smile, the way he'd looked the interviewer in the eye and convinced them he was exactly what they needed. He'd even allowed himself to imagine what it would be like to tell Emma that Daddy had gotten the job, that things were finally going to get better. Then he heard the cry. Marcus found her crumpled near the hallway leading to the restrooms, a woman probably in her late 50s, clutching her chest, her face gray and twisted in pain. Her designer handbag had spilled across the floor, and she was gasping for breath, trying to speak but unable to form words. The hallway was empty, the morning rush of office workers already settled at their desks. For a moment, Marcus stood frozen, his mind screaming at him about the time, about the interview, about everything riding on the next hour. But then training from an old first aid course kicked in, and more than that, basic human decency took over. He dropped his briefcase and fell to his knees beside her, his hands already reaching for his phone to dial 911. "I've got you," he said, his voice steady even though his heart was hammering. "You're going to be okay. I'm calling for help right now." The woman's eyes locked onto his, wide with fear and pain, and she gripped his hand with surprising strength. Marcus stayed on the line with the dispatcher, describing her symptoms, following their instructions, all while keeping his voice calm and reassuring. "Just breathe with me," he told her, demonstrating slow, steady breaths. "Help is coming. You're not alone." The minutes stretched like taffy as Marcus monitored her pulse, loosened her collar, and kept talking to her in that steady, calm voice even as his watch ticked past 9:20, 9:25, 9:30. The exact moment his interview was supposed to begin, he was holding a stranger's hand, watching paramedics rush through the lobby doors. They worked quickly and efficiently, loading her onto a stretcher, asking Marcus questions about what he'd witnessed. She'd been conscious the whole time, never taking her eyes off him, and as they wheeled her away, she managed to mouth two words that he'd remember forever. "Thank you." Marcus stood in the hallway surrounded by her scattered belongings, his suit rumpled, his hands shaking as the adrenaline drained away. It was 9:45. He was 15 minutes late for the interview that was supposed to save his life, and he smelled like fear and the antiseptic scent of paramedics. He gathered the woman's things quickly, handing them to building security, and then ran for the elevator, knowing it was probably futile but unable to give up without trying. His phone buzzed as he rode up to the 14th floor. A text from the HR coordinator. "Mr. Bennett, we've been waiting. Unfortunately, we cannot reschedule. Thank you for your interest." The rejection hit him like a physical blow. Marcus read the message twice, then 3 times, as if the words might rearrange themselves into something different. But they stayed the same, cold and final. He stood in the elevator as it descended back to the lobby, watching all his hopes dissolve like sugar in rain. No job. No rescue. No way to give Emma the stability she deserved. Just another failed opportunity, another door slammed in his face, another reminder that life didn't care how hard you tried or how much you needed a break. He made it to his car before the tears came, hot and angry, streaming down his face as he gripped the steering wheel. It wasn't fair. He'd done the right thing, hadn't he? He'd saved someone's life, probably, and this was his reward. Marcus let himself cry for exactly 2 minutes, the way he'd learned to do since Sarah left, giving himself a brief window to feel everything before shutting it down and focusing on what came next. Because Emma would be home from school in a few hours, and she couldn't see him like this, couldn't know that her dad had failed again. He wiped his face, started the car, and drove to his afternoon job at the warehouse, where he spent 6 hours loading boxes and trying not to think about what might have been. His boss noticed he was distracted and gave him a warning about his productivity. Marcus apologized and worked harder, pushing his body until his muscles screamed, welcoming the physical pain because it was easier than the emotional kind. When he finally picked up Emma from after-school care, he plastered on the biggest smile he could manage. "How was your day, princess?" he asked as she buckled into her car seat, her backpack covered in the butterfly patches they'd ironed on together last weekend. "We learned about butterflies," Emma announced, her gap-toothed grin lighting up her whole face. "Did you know they taste with their feet? That's so weird, Daddy." She chattered on about her day, about her friend Sophia and the art project they'd started, and Marcus listened to every word, letting her joy wash over him like medicine. This was what mattered. This little girl who believed her father could do anything, who had no idea how close they were to losing everything. He'd find another job. He always did. He'd find a way because failure wasn't an option when you had someone depending on you. That evening, after dinner and bath time and 2 stories and 3 glasses of water and one more hug, Marcus sat at their small kitchen table and updated his resume, sending applications to every job posting that seemed even remotely possible. He worked until midnight, his eyes burning, his coffee cold, his hope flickering but not quite extinguished. He'd done the right thing that morning. He knew he had. But knowing didn't pay the rent, and knowing didn't put food on the table, and knowing didn't stop him from wondering what would have happened if he'd just taken those elevator doors and gone to his interview, leaving someone else to find the fallen woman. 3 days passed with no responses to his applications. Marcus worked his warehouse shifts, picked up an extra one when someone called in sick, and tried not to calculate how many weeks until they'd be evicted if nothing changed. Emma seemed to sense something was wrong despite his efforts to hide it. She was quieter than usual, watching him with those big brown eyes that saw too much for a 5-year-old. On Thursday night, she climbed into his lap while he was looking at bills and wrapped her small arms around his neck. "Are you sad, Daddy?" she asked, her voice small and worried. Marcus hugged her tight, breathing in the strawberry scent of her shampoo. "I'm just tired, baby. But I'm never sad.